Welcome back to We Play Games. I'm Walker, and here we are in Crusader Kings 3 After the End, looking at the continent of South America. So, in Crusader Kings 2 After the End, South America does exist, but it's mostly these three empires up here, 5 Guyanas, Venezuela, and Colombia. The Amazon kind of exists, but most of South America is off-map, specifically in highlighting Brazil. Brazil exists in the CK2 version of the mod, but it exists as a China stand-in. It uses the Jade Dragon mechanics, so you can interact with it through a special panel. The provinces exist off-map. You're never going to touch them. And so it's a really different presentation here in the CK3 version of the mod, and that means that there's just an enormous number of cultures and religions that we really can't talk about all of them in one video. And so what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to break it up into individual lore videos focusing on bookmarks. And I think we'll definitely do bookmarks for Brazil, Pampa, and Tawantinsuyu at a minimum, because those three are all Empire ranked titles that exist in the game. And I'm really excited to talk about them, because I think all three of them also highlight something really interesting about South America, which is its terrain. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with what's going on in South America in real life, the Quechua language group, for instance, exists still in Peru and a lot of the areas that were once touched by the Incan Empire, by Tawantinsuyu. And the Quechua language group is still spoken by 8.5 to 10 million people. And that's only one of the many indigenous languages that's still widely spoken in South America. And the indigenous groups are doing so well here, of course, because the terrain is so dramatic. So in South America, there are a couple of really big geographic features that you need to keep in mind. There's the Pampa. This is like essentially a steppe, a very fertile, flat area used for a lot of beef herding these days. But it's really conducive to, for instance, gauchos. But the two areas that people probably are more familiar with are the Amazon and the Andes. And those two are so unbelievably linked that we really do need to kind of frame the story for you in terms of the geography. So here along the western spine, we see the Andes Mountains. The Andes Mountains are the longest continental mountain chain in the world. And the Andes Mountains are really fascinating because of the way they interact with the Pacific Ocean and Antarctica. So normally you would expect with a giant mountain chain right here, what would happen is all of this warm, wet air would come off of the ocean and it would bounce off of the mountains and then deposit a whole lot of rain right here. But there's a second mechanism forcing the air up over the Andes, and it's a massive Arctic blast coming up off of Antarctica. And this is a giant wedge of cold, dry air that sort of forces its way underneath the warm, wet air coming off of the Pacific, and it pushes it up over the Andes Mountains and then floods the entirety of the Amazon. And that's why the Amazon River is so big. For those of you who don't know what we're looking at, this is the largest rainforest in the world, but it's also by volume the largest river in the world. It clears 25% of the world's river discharge flows through the Amazon River. And so the forces here are not just political and they're not just cultural. They're forces of nature that are kind of shaping the cultures that are surviving here in this dramatic landscape. For those of you who don't know where these Andes Mountains come from, it's two continental shelves smashing into each other. It's part of that Pacific Ring of Fire. There's mountains that are volcanoes, there's earthquakes, landslides, dramatic and powerful terrain. And that powerful terrain, of course, is going to influence the people who live here and impart legacies and traditions that interact well with the terrain that they are surviving in. But it's not just a story of indigenous people doing well in CK3 After the End, because of course there are going to be small religions that survive any sort of apocalypse because they are insular and are able to use their close-knit small group to survive. Essentially a diaspora community here, and then real-life minorities. And so there's just like an incredible diversity of faiths and cultures to talk about when it comes to South America. I don't think that we should talk about all of them in one video, but I think you do need to understand sort of as a frame tale that this is not a story of the humans living here. This is very much a story of the Earth itself, and then the humans are just sort of along for the ride. So that'll be what we'll be focusing on in the CK3 After the End lore videos. Like I said, we're gonna definitely do one for each of the empires that exist on map, and then we'll probably do one for some of the other large geographic areas, like one for the Amazon, one for the north of South America. But I think there's, oh, and of course the Atacama Desert, which is one of those dry territories made by that Arctic blast. But I'm really looking forward to sharing CK3 After the End South America with you guys. So like and subscribe. We will be doing a lot of After the End content starting this week probably, because I do have a build that's working. Even if I have to switch back to Open Beta 1, which mostly worked, I'm okay with that. But I think Open Beta 5 is working for me. Okay, that's Walker. Take care.